We are going to see today how fiction plays a role of an archive, to be more specific, a social archive. I have chosen today a novel which is based on the incidents from the recent past, mediated by mass media, and which have left a deep scar in the collective consciousness of our social memory. And this fiction becomes a viable source of history. The events which the current novel that we're going to discuss, Death of Mr. Love, explored is the celebrated murder case of Prem Ahuja by Commander Nanavati, which took place in 1959. And the sensation created by the media has been reconstructed by Indrasena to his advantage. Now, the proximity of common man to the events reported in the media is closer now than ever before because of technology. Time and space are more or less simultaneous with immediate coverage. The presentation of the story by the media predefines the onlooker's viewing and response to it, thus making it a story of a story. The architecture of truth lost through the rendition is significant. Often, crimes presented in the popular media dense in our psyche, mirroring the deepest fear in our mind. These are the crimes that linger on the memory of people. It goes beyond a cathartic shock and pushes us to the very edge of our civilized world. These crimes, either homicide or genocide, created are amply sensationalized by media. Sensational news are characterized by imperatives that are dramatic and which elicits emotion. In television, news channels, these are mostly limited to crime stories and to a certain extent to political story. There is a moral aspect to sensational news, of course. News as well as some news regarded as sensational are associated with society's moral well-being. Media also plays a key role in opinion building and influencing juries involved in the case, which puts into question the objectivity of judgment. Literary artists often react to such news and utilize these in their creative work. We are going to deal with a novel which utilizes events that have been made into sensational homicide news stories which have affected people very deeply. This novel, by an Indian author, has recorded the event of the social history of contemporary India, creating a discursive discourse. It often turns out to be writing back against the popular belief, opinion, or agenda set by the media, and sometimes opposes the media. These aspects are utilized in their writing, which stands as social archive of collective memory of people. Writers contest media by offering alternate perspective and highlighting deliberately neglected spots of truth. In this connection, let us now commence our reading today of Indrasena's The Death of Mr. Love, which was published in 2002. Before we move into the text, let us have a brief overview on the author. Sinha or Indra Sinha is a Bombay-born Anglo-Indian copywriter turned novelist, now settled in the United Kingdom. His masterpiece, Animals People, has received critical acclaim and was shortlisted for Man Booker Prize in 2007 and won the Commonwealth Literary Prize in the year 2008. His father was an Indian naval officer and his mother, Irene Elizabeth Furey, better known as Rani Sinha, was an author who wrote in The New Statesman. Indra Sinha has published several non-fiction, which includes the celebrated memoir The Cyber Gypsies. He made his debut in fiction with The Death of Mr. Love. Animals People, published in 2007, Sinha's most celebrated work, was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize in 2007. As we said a little earlier, Sinha's The Death of Mr. Love is based on the murder of Prem Ahuja. Prem Ahuja was a Sindhi businessman and he was murdered by Navy Commander Kawas Manekshaw Nanavati on April 27, 1959. It was a murder case revolving around two influential families of that time. Nanavati killed his wife's lover, confessed his crime, and 6 months later the case came up for hearing at Bombay Session Court. Nanavati changed his confession later at the court and stated that after he learnt about the affair, he went to Ahuja's residence to ask if he would marry Sylvia. Ahuja's alleged reply, within quote, "Do I have to marry every woman I sleep with?" unquote, enraged Nanavati. A scuffle ensued, and Nanavati's revolver was triggered and Ahuja was shot dead. The jury, consisting of 9 members, acquitted Nanavati 8-1 and found him not guilty. The session judge declared the jury perverse, and a retrial was ordered. In 1960, the case was reopened for hearing and Nanavati was convicted for life imprisonment. Nanavati appeal to the Supreme Court was heard in 1961, but the earlier sentence was upheld. The case garnered media coverage more than that of assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. It is regarded the case transformed the judicial history of India. The plot of the murder and its background has been constructed by media and body of literature that has taken keen interest in this case. Nanavati had just returned from the sea. Sylvia, Nanavati's Anglo-Indian wife, confesses to him about her affair with Prem Ahuja. Having finished his lunch, Nanavati leaves Sylvia and their 2 children to the Metro Cinema for the afternoon show of Tom Thumb. He then goes to his ship docked at the Bombay harbour and gets himself a revolver and ammunition from the ship's armory and uses the same to kill the lover of his wife. Prem Ahuja, as he emerges from his bathtub, 3 shots from Nanavati's the revolver and Ahuja was dead. Ahuja's murder created a sensation in the mind of quickly modernizing India. The next day, there were headlines like 3 shots that shook the nation, and peddlers and hawkers were in business selling Ahuja towel and toy Nanavati revolvers in the streets of Bombay. The court case, K. Nanavati versus State Maharashtra, received overwhelming media coverage. Blitz, yes, Blitz, Blitz, was a weekly magazine owned by Sindhi businessman Karanjia, covered the case with a lot of enthusiasm as a story of love, betrayal, and restoration of honor, drawing public sympathy for Nanavati, the perpetrator of murder. It told the handsome naval officer's courtship with Sylvia in England leading to marriage, and how she was enticed by the villain Prem Ahuja, whom Blitz described as a symbol of those wealthy, corrupt, immoral, and basically unsocialist forces which are holding the nation and its integrity to ransom. Aarti Sethi said that Blitz exhibited no discretion in portraying Ahuja that is generally reserved for the dead. Blitz wrote, I quote, "Some may attribute this sickening event to the heat of the reason, but this is mistake. Persons such as he do not share the lot of the common man. They live in a world of privilege. For their sins, their outrage, their crimes, they and they alone are to blame." Now next what happens? The Bombay High Court found the verdict skewed as the jury seemed to have been misled. The High Court reconsidered all the evidence and found Nanavati guilty. In the present novel, Indra Sinha chose to rewrite the actual incident of Nanavati's murder case, which had its pretext of 2 high-class influential communities in which thrived an extramarital love affair among Prem Ahuja and Sylvia, the Anglo-Indian wife of Navy Commander Nanavati, which created a tornado in the media during the 1950s. The Nanavati trial had a far-reaching impact in Dadin Nehru government. Indra Sinha extends the story in which next generations of the victims comes to know a secret that remained hidden for years until Balu's old mother, one of the characters, before her death, left behind a box full of full of letters and an unfinished story which indicates that there was another crime connected with the homicide which has curbed out Balu's course of life. In Sinha's version of history, there are not one but two women in life of Mr. Love, who is the fictional representation of Prema Huja. One of them is Sybil, a close friend of Balu's mother. Being dejected, Sybil comes to Maya's residence, to seek recluse with her daughter Phoebe. Sybil was carrying Mr. Love's child, who washed away his hand from any responsibility. As a result, Sybil had to undergo abortion. In the meanwhile, Mr. Love gets shot, as the world knows. What remains untold that Indra Sinha imagines is a plot of blackmailing of Sybil by a senior police officer who periodically extorted money from her. The policeman had acquired some letters that could establish Sybil's extramarital relationship with Prema Huja or Mr. Love, and using those letters he blackmailed Sybil, which could defame her. Sybil's daughter, Phoebe, saw her mother succumbing to rapid deterioration under depression and fear. When Phoebe was growing up, she comes to know about the threat her mother had been suffering all the years until she died. Phoebe decides to revenge the blackmailer with the help of Balu, her childhood friend. Consequently, they return to India, which they left in their childhood, and revive the relationship with the old place and childhood friend Dula. Phoebe and Balu ultimately find out the police officer who they suspect as the blackmailer, confront him and accuse him of blackmailing Sybil, and threatens him to expose his misdeeds to the press. Phoebe blackmails the retired police officer, inventing a notebook out of air which she says has been left by Sybil, which could unmask the perpetrator of the crime. The policeman remains unperturbed and composed, and it is not known for sure whether he was indeed a blackmailer. However, Phoebe is certain that he is the man behind the blackmail and extortion. Following the event, Phoebe disappears as she thinks she has already met the enemy and has frightened him. While Balu returns to London, Phoebe by letter informs Balu that she has settled in Goa with an Italian man. Balu receives another parcel left by his mother to be handed over to him after her death. It is a notebook. In the epilogue, Balu gives some sketchy details alone with which the readers are left to their imagination. I quote, everything is there: dates, times, places, and amounts, listed in rupees. The dates begin in 1959 and continue through to the mid 1960s. There are passages of narrative too. Unquote. It remains a mystery what Balu is going to do with the notebook. The indecisive and open-ended structure of the plot reminds us that this is one of the possible historiographies of the text that has also been constructed by the media in its own accord. Sinha takes a romantic position and pulls up the ghost of Mr. Love, who expresses his grudge against image constructed by the media, as he says, and I quote, this is the ghost of Mr. Love is saying, I am, it seems, a lout villain, a cynical genie of the whiskey bottle, given entirely to vice, a symbol of those wealthy, corrupt, immoral, and basically unsocialist forces which are holding the nation and its integrity to ransom. Unquote. This last is a quotation from Blitz, our city's beloved scandal sheet, which would like its reader to believe me capable of murder. In a very subtle way, Sinha carves out the tragic face of Prema Huja or Mr. Love, an irresponsible and dishonest man who could not decide which of the two women he loved and lost in the process also lost his life. The rest of the event that happened after his death was out of his control, so his ghost has to be given a voice in his defense. What Maya leaves for Valu is a collection of newspaper cuttings which connects the entire web of related events, bring upon various situations, changing people's life around their life. Sinha also takes a sympathetic stand toward Mr. Love, whose tragic flaw was not being able to take a decision on his own. This tale assigns great social importance to the art of storytelling as it concentrates on two people who discover the intertwining relationship between their families connected to a high profile murder in Bombay, which actually happened in the newly formed independent India. The protagonist of the novel is a naive hero, Balu, a middle aged man who is very accomplished in his business as a second hand bookseller. He is known to his playmates as Bhola Bhalu. Even at his 50s, Balu's writer mother Maya teases him as Bhola Bhalu. Balu's mother's name, Maya, means illusion, who was of the opinion that writers have the responsibility to become a change agent of the world and their stories have the power to change and therefore they must be cautious about what they tell in their tales and to whom. But one can only be careful but may not be successful in taking proper decision. One can only choose from what is being offered and the offers are limited. Maya is aware of the incalculable and endless powers which has effects which the writers cannot control. False stories, like lies, can be controlled, should be controlled, as is the story created by Blitz by Prema Ahuja. Maya's point of view is that all our stories have a beginning before the beginning and there is nothing like an end. We can never say that a story begins at one point and ends at a specific point. She rightly says, there are no individual stories, only the story, coiling and weaving through all our lives. The writer's life may end, but the stories remain and circulate in the society. The stories of the poor remain unheard, complained Maya, but it is because the elite authors do not bother to write about them and know about their life, nor does the happy, higher, and middle class have willingness to know about them. The poor thus remain underrepresented and missing in the discourse of a society, though our lives are touched by their innumerable moments every day. The invisibility and silence hardly seem strange and appalling in the day-to-day life of social existence. At another level, through Maya's statement, the author suggests that the public is interested in the sensational stories publicized by magazines like Blitz. There is no escape from the illusion created by the media. The narrative of Blitz, as has been quoted often by Sinha, demonstrates how every week crime fiction was created, coupled with journalistic tricks of sensational writing in every issue, digging out some element of Prema Huja's life, making him a villain, and that continued in making films in various adaptations of the situations and circumstances, making the murder honor killing. Indra Sinha challenges this notion and the version of produced knowledge in his engaging prose, creating the captivating atmosphere of detective fiction. However, one would wonder that it is more than just that. Sinha captures many other dimensions of the society and nation at large that forms our collective consciousness of shared identity. Chaos is produced by the media, which is used by people with vested interest. The national discourse has been largely concentrated in the hands of the few who are powerful and rich. Selective and partial group identities are the operation to build up public opinion in the process of which the national identity of being an Indian was compromised. The perpetrator of murder, Nanavati, was a rich Parsi and the victim, Prema Huja, was a rich Sindhi businessman. Thus, the case became a battle between the two rich business classes, the Parsis and the Sindhis. Indra Sinha is not judgmental while he is speaking about the trial of Nanavati. Rather, he records the history of contemporary India and situates the incident within the larger national discourse of social memory. Therefore, he talks about partition of India, Hindu-Muslim riots, assassination of Gandhi, where Maya becomes mouthpiece of the author who opines that the British Raj was better than the independent India as it gave a sense of purpose of gaining freedom. With India's independence, the sense of purpose was lost. Sinha brings in intertextuality where Maya brings reference to Balu's Jyotivat's short story, where an extremely old man during the partition of 1947 recollects how his grandfather fought against the British with Muslims and Hindus standing hand in hand in 1857, and how the British Raj took revenge by blowing people to bits by the cannon and forcing them to lick blood from the war-torn streets of Kanpur. The old man's grandfather opined that after the mutiny, the British worked to create a wedge between the Hindus and Muslims. The British revenge came in the form of Act of 1903, partitioning Hindustani language into Urdu and Hindi. 1947, the same divide in language was used as a pretext of partition and the theory of two-nation policy. As the theme is situated during the early days of post-independent India, there is plethora of reference to the contemporary social reality. For instance, Maya leaves behind a lot of newspaper cuttings about assassination of Gandhi by Nathuram Godse. As Nanavati was released by intervention of the government, Nathuram Godse's brother, who was accused of being an accomplice, also had to be released. Valu received an unfinished story titled Retribution from his writer mother, which was left by her before she died. The introduction of the case of famous and notorious case of trial of Nanavati has to be dramatic as it was a grand event made by the media. Therefore, Sinha too prefers to sustain the same heat in his plot with an element of surprise and suspense. I'll quote a small passage to illustrate. Quote, I told the story as far as I could remember it. The rich Sindhi seducer, the English wife of an Indian naval officer, the jealous husband going to the playboy's flat, shooting him, the scandal and sensation of the trial. I could still hardly believe that the story told in Retribution referred to this shooting, because if it did, it meant that Phoebe's mother, mine, had been entangled. Incredible thought. In the most notorious case ever to come before the Indian court, the trial of Commander Pavas Nanavati of Indian Navy for the killing of Prem Bhagwandas Ahuja. Unquote. Thus, this novel, The Death of Mr. Love by Sinha, does not come out to Sinha's readers as a labor of novelist's love, but more as a labored affair. It sometimes fails to sustain the interest of the reader. Sometimes the thematic progress is dull and interrupted to be endured in good anticipation. The length of the novel is reached by bringing in not so very well connected descriptions and details which work against an otherwise an idealist project of the novelist about exposing the role of media and its vested interest in the subtle, quite visible way throughout the course of post-independence history of India. Sinha, in terms of style and treatment of theme, is a victim of his own unstable fictional design. He employs every detail, rather too many issues that come on his way to create the atmosphere. The positive, then, in terms of outcome of our reading of The Death of Mr. Love, is that it recreates, rather reclaims, a particular social content from history of our times and challenge the status quo of the manifested truth in general. In a general, that is Indian notion, considering media and its activism always to be neutral and detached. Sinha does this by writing a piece of social realist fiction in a light and entertaining and somewhat perplexing style in order to sensationalize our mind towards alternative possibilities about how a legal system, electoral democracy, and bureaucracy function. The novel abounds in examples given by Sinha to bring the logic home to our minds that the media has not only been concerned with highlighting the reality, but it has willfully been constructing and reconstructing the truth as well. An agenda that is worked upon by media hand in hand with the powers that matter within the establishment. Sinha weaves the argument about nexus and complicity between media and the establishment of power by deriving from multiple sources reports of the contemporary media, especially print media, among which reporting of Blitz, edited by R.K. Karanjia, is mainly described in detail as having a clear-cut agenda towards weaving a moral story of a brave Indian soldier ending up taking a bold moral decision of killing the villain who, through his immoral ways, courts and succeeds in seducing the soldier's innocent wife. A big narrative is constructed about the high moral grounds that the soldier Nanavati had taken and how the villain criminally tried to play with the strict and stronghold moral codes of the contemporary Indian society. The affluent Indian class breaking ethical and moral boundaries which were not what media would ever choose to report about, rather in many subtle ways such adventures were made light of in their unconfirmed representations only in self-explanatory gossip columns. The idea was not to challenge the established moral codes of the society in order to set and reconfirm such ideological positions in the masses of consumers of news. Sinha, in his own way, tries to read the silences in the media's behavior in reporting and succeeds in reconstructing an alternative historiographic detail on the issue. Not only media, but the whole body of contemporary cultural production in India stands problematized in the novel. Nanavati's act and story is deconstructed in a Bollywood movie in the following year titled Ye Raaste Hai Pyar Ke, which was screened in 1963. Author brings reference to this version of reconstruction of reality as well, in a way which tells us about how reportings, reconstructions, and representations of reality have always been contested cultural categories. The movie, rather than coming out with realities associated with Nanavati's case, simply converts it into consumable and marketable cultural commodity in the market. In doing so, a cheating wife becomes rather a misguided, beguiled, and cheated herself, who, in the time after the killing of her lover by her not so loving husband, takes on the garb of a repentant, innocent Indian woman who might at times disagree and disengage with the patriarchal husband but would not go against or beyond him in public space. The movie is therefore all about constructing a sale-worthy reality, a reality which has a market. This constructed reality tells us a lot about how representations do not represent, as within their subtle, indirect ways they do not want to represent. But the question coming out of the narrative of Sinha is loud and clear. If representations are not valid and histories are one-dimensional, reconstructing and reclaiming version of reality through the projects like rewriting of history and fictions, cultural representation must be the chosen practices of creative critical communities and intelligentsia. Sinha brings in the example of Gandhi's murder case, which within its much prolonged hearing and proceedings sees one of the co-accused, Gopal Godse, brother of Nathuram Godse, having been given the benefit of doubt and allowed to go unpunished. The argument is not directed to why a supposed killer of Gandhi was not punished, but revolves around valid existence of discourses that have claims to be alternative discourses to Gandhian discourse of nation. Sinha thus throws light upon his own project of constructing alternative knowledge in the novel. Various examples of media reporting and responses from the establishment are the sources upon which he keeps on building the fabric of narrative which doubts its own foundation and presumptions. The result is not so engaging novel, but certainly a convincing reconstruction of alternative social content. In this respect, but only in this respect, the novel can be read as representative alternative history of the times and themes reconstructed within its pages. In doing so, we exclude many other details and accounts of the novelist's own musings and imaginative pains undertaken so freely in the text that certainly seems to be lengthier than desired. Sinha is committed to his textual politics, but only succeeds partially as a craftsman in fictional art, and the novel fails to register an impact that it otherwise could have in the minds of the readers and critics. Sinha's use of intertextuality, postmodern techniques, creates an alternative that convinces within the imagination of the reader as he goes on communicating possibilities, womanhood and femininity, and structure of patriarchy, the interplay of, in a way, power and powerlessness. An interesting feature in this context is that Sinha seems to refuse to believe in the repentance of Sylvia in guise of a wronged and cheated woman as constructed and highlighted by the media and powerful sections of the society. Rather, he would like to paint a picture of a sort of liberated woman beyond the bounds of ethical judgments. Notions of femininity stand deconstructed and liberated in the choice made by Sylvia in her life. Sinha's narrative passes many hints to his effect and problematizes the communicated and received reality about the woman having been innocent and a victim and not one in complicity with Ahuja, who is painted by the media and power forces as the sole perpetrator of the crime. One major engagement of Sinha as a novelist and reinterpreter of history is to point out towards the fact that in post-independent India there has emerged a comprador class of neo-colonial pseudo-intelligentsia that has taken control over the process of knowledge construction in every walk of life. The media is intended in this, the construction of discourses where meaning is absolute the way it is constructed. Alternative possibilities are rather not allowed to exist. Sinha subtly puts forth how the image of Gandhi as the father of the nation is challenged as the government of free India in the name of peace and reconciliation could not punish Gandhi's assassins. Apart from the actual incident of murder on which this novel is based, Sinha weaves various parallel themes which progresses and makes way for various ideological and cultural discussions. Sinha weaves an argument by remembering our almost forgotten heroes from our literary and cultural space, as he names the forgotten and not so much celebrated literary and cultural icons like Manto, Faiz, Rajendra Singh Bedi, Kishan Chander, Kafi Azmi, and Mazrou Sultanpuri, in order to make it bold that their insights, if these would have been made part of the canonical discourse in India, had the potential to truly contribute to a literary, cultural, social, economic space in post-independent India. Sinha states that it took 16 years for the British to allow their servants and women to read Lady Chatterley's Lover after Chugati wrote Le Havre and defended it from the charges of obscenity, thereby proclaiming that in the literary and cultural realm, India was ahead of time with reference to its colonizer, British ruler. How dominant power structure of oppression do not change but keep on reinventing and manifesting themselves again and again through the course of history is very well taken up by Sinha in the novel. How an oppressive patriarchal mindset operates in days is hinted at and critiqued subtly by Sinha. How these feudal structures of oppressing give way to a neo-industrial urban system which in turn resurfaces as a class of internal colonizers in the garb of nationalist forces from within to whom the power is transferred by the political colonizers from beyond the borders is what is invoked by Sinha throughout the course of his narrative in order to underscore the point that there is a way in which assumptions of power can be challenged in in re-reporting and reconstructing multiple meanings of the theories of our lives and dreams. The death of Mr. Love demonstrates how the media has accomplished to society, uses its forces to preserve the myth of wronged womanhood and redesign adultery and murder in the discursive guise of a good wife passing through the rite of chaos and final retribution by a punishment upon evil and restoration of order. The tangential strand of the unpunished Gandhi assassination accomplice amply demonstrates the conjunction of truth, justice, and nexus of power. Let us move into one more novel by Sinha. I have already mentioned about Animals People. It is a critically acclaimed work shortlisted for Man Booker Award in 2007 and won Commonwealth Literary Award in 2008. This is the story of Bhopal gas tragedy, the infamous incident or accident that bears the black mark in the consciousness of the people of India. It is the largest man-made disaster without the war situation. Negligence, laxity of law was the reason for this apocalypse. Union Carbide, a transnational corporate company, is held responsible for the accident. The whip of the deadly gas methyl isocyanide caused thousands of tolls. The survivors bear the scar in their body and mind with deformities and abnormalities. The effect of this apocalypse was nothing less than the disaster of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with atomic weapons. Bhopal faced a silent explosion without any noise at the dead of the night, with the people dying with scorching of eyes and burning lungs with methyl isocyanate. Sinha creates a fictional character in this novel called Animal. Animal is twisted in body and mind. A young man who calls himself Animal opens up the grim fictional world with the close proximity of the reality, saying, I used to be human once. The narrative begins with the reference to the distant past 20 years ago when the protagonist, Animal, was an infant and now 20 recollecting his past. Until that night within court, the night of the deadly gas leakage, affected him for his life. Later, in the course of the narrative, we find Animal suffering from the bouts of schizophrenia, hearing strange sounds in his head. Soon after it begins the novel tells us Animal calls himself Animal. He has a twisted spine and cannot stand on his 2 feet. During the bouts of schizophrenia, he would be filled up with envy against everything that walks or even stands on 2 legs. His endless list of jealousies includes his acquaintance and children playing hopscotch, As a child among his peers, he was abusively called animal as he moves on all his foe. He took the name and made it his identity. His only quadruped companion is Jara, a stray bitch. Both of them, the man and the animal, led similar scavenger existence. His first encounter with Jara was while fighting over food from a dustbin. The man-made apocalypse makes the entire city dislocated with sufferings and diseases. Archival records from the news media reveal that modus operandi of the Union Carbide Company prior to the disaster and their callousness after that. Sinha introduces a befitting first-person narrative technique and meticulously uses animals' voice recording into tapes. Therefore, instead of chapter headings, we have sequential tape numbers. Animal received the tape from an Australian journalist, one among the many foreign journalists who come to Kharagpur. Kharagpur is a place, a fictional place. Chunaram, a local shopkeeper who made some additional income by offering the guide to foreign journalists, accompanies the journalist. Transnational news agencies and their journalists often visited Kharagpur after it became the hotspot of news story following the apocalypse. Animal barters history with his buckaroo journalist, as he names the Australian journalist, whereas Chunaram extracts money from the journalist by introducing Animal to him. The apocalypse gives rise to business like Raju's attaining sainthood in R.K. Narayan's The Guide. As Raju suffers, local business thrives on him. Animal's record in the tape serves two important functions in the narrative. First, it is essential to give credibility to his characterization because he cannot write. He is strongly egotistic that is why he does not use the tapes that he received from the journalist. He is telling his story because he wants to tell his story out of his compulsion, like the ancient mariner in the Coleridge's The Rime of Ancient Mariner. Animal is sarcastic, acidic, bitter, and a misanthrope, atheist, oppressed and depressed by his disability and suffers neglect. Journalists turn the survivors of Kharagpur into storytellers who have been endlessly repeating the same story about the night. Animal refuses to tell the tale that middleman Chunaram wants him to tell. He does not want himself to be commodified by Chunaram as well as the mainstream media. He does not want the Australian journalist Fuok to write a book about him. He says, how can foreigner at the world's other end who have never set foot in Kharagpur decide what's to be said about this place? He thinks about the journalist. I'll quote. He will go away and forget them, every last one, for his short, we are not really people, we don't have names, we fit in crowds at the corner of his eye. Extra, we are in his movie. Unquote. Animal believes that books should change things. The journalist tells him, when you speak, forget me, forget everything. Talk straight to the people who will read your words. If you tell the truth from your heart, they will listen. What is hidden in journalistic writing is carefully portrayed in the fictional writing. Newspapers inform comment, give their opinion through editorial features, and later the stories have life in the archives. A work of art lives forever. A work of art such as novel is an act of historiography which the author mirrors the events in history, reconstructing them through imagination. The narrator, author or the character voices the unheard. Journalistic writings and reports in newspapers do not have the scope for developing characters who believe that art should affect a change in the society. But the art of fiction does not compromise itself with plot. The real place and people become crystallized through imagination and evolves in the fictional place in a vivid, sharp manner. Sinha's Animal is a character who directly confronts the Australian journalist, or the journalese as he calls him. He is not the one who is going to answer to the interviewer, the journalist, the media, again and again about what happened that night when the tragedy took place. The voice of the sufferer gets suppressed in the act of somebody else's writing the suffering's story. Thus, Sinha fixes a narrator at the center of the plot who takes us for a ride of Kafur, that is the fictionalized Gopal. The hunchbacked animal symbolically represent the subaltern point of view that expands from below. The defunct, dysfunctional, and abused body of animal becomes the metaphor of the diseased human ecology. The victims of Kafur are a discourse of inhumanity, neglect of the perpetrator of the crime, the Union Carbide Company and the government. Another character over here, Alia, is the youngest of the victims in Kafur. Kafur is a hell on earth where the souls are in panic. Kafur is a cryptic metaphor which literally means a city of terror. It is a place of terror, a hell incarnate, habitable because people have faces to hide their souls. Thus, life continues in an apparently smooth way, but beneath the thin veneer of normalcy lays the reeking wound and suffering, schizophrenia. Animal hears the voices and sees images that are non-existent. He says, quote, some believe in God whom they have never seen, who never says hello. In each other's dream, we are all fucking fish guts. Unquote. Animal feels a compulsion to tell his story. It is a psychic relief at its act as it acts as a therapy. Thus, his story aptly becomes a story sung by an ulcer. Like a giant, he captivates the readers when he says, I quote, I am talking to the eyes that are reading these words. Now I am talking to you. Thus the author presents the subaltern character that not only speaks to but also captivates the reader. He is only a voice, a powerful voice without an organ. Animal again reinforces his stand as he repeats, I quote, you are reading my words. You are that person. I have no name for you, so I'll call you Eyes. My job is to talk. Yours is to listen. So now listen. Unquote. The animal begins his personal narrative, stating with that deadly night. He points out that how that night has defined the binary of division between before the past and after the present, as animal points out. I'll read a short passage once again. When something big like that night happens, time divides into before and after, and before time breaks up into dreams. The dreams dissolve to darkness. That's how it's here. All the world knows the name of Kafur, but no one knows how things were before that night. Unquote. Here lies yet another difference between the narrative in the novel and that of the narrative of the journalistic news reporting or feature writing. A novel, in its length and breadth, behaves like an organism that grows and breathes with life. But when Sinha sketches Animal, Alia, or any other ailing, suffering individual of Kafpur, he relies on characters that are based on reality. Images of sufferings and death coalesce to form part of the fictional characters. The big thing that happened in America when it I saw on the television. Do you know what I did? This is from the tape that Animal has recorded. I clapped. I thought, fantastic. This plane comes out of nowhere fly to Badon, into this building. Pow, blam, blam, flowers of flame. Unquote. The toll of Bhopal gas disaster was three times that of 9/11 attack. Moreover, it is America, the abode of the company, that is the company, the UCI, that have defied COP. But it does not seem to be a cause to please animal. Rather, the sufferings of Kapoor makes the grotesque enjoyable. When animal's friends tells him to stop thinking himself as an animal, he finds it shattering. He says, Zafar and Farooq have this in common. I should cease thinking of myself as an animal and become human again. Well, maybe if I'm cured, otherwise I'll never do it. And here's why. If I agree to be a human being, I'll always have to agree that I am wrong shaped and abnormal. But let me be quadruped animal, four-footed and free. Then I am whole, my own proper shape, just a different kind of animal, from say Jara or a cow or a camel. Unquote. There is close affinity of his suffering of animal with that of Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Animal likes Ailey, loves Nisha, but he knows he cannot get either of them as his lover and wife. He is aware of the disability as a lack and therefore hides his human identity from himself. He has at the heart of an indomitable desire to stand on his two legs, which Ellie, being a doctor, can help. The song that Animal occasionally sings, boasting his identity, is a song of dissent. Therefore, Animal sings his song loud and louder. I am an animal, fierce and free. In all the world is none like me. Crooked I am, a nightmare child, fed on hunger, running wild. No love and cuddle for this boy. Live without hope, laugh without joy. But if you dare to pity me, I'll shit in your shoe and piss in your tea. Unquote. What can a person say who has been beaten right from birth and before to become crooked by the globalized transnational society, where common people are numbers in the process of termination who are going to die some way or the other? Animal song is a strong slap on the face of transnational global neocolonial world which try to present a human face. Nobody has any right to be animal because pity leads to catharsis. Sinha thinks that animals people should not be read as a Bhopal reader. As an author, he has stated that he does not believe that literature should change the world. However, his characters believe so. The disguise of Kapoor and Bhopal is so thin that it is difficult to read the text forgetting Bhopal and its suffering people. Animal is comic and lovable, especially in the use of his Hindi slangs and abuses. He had his life, he and his life are funny, weird, sweet, and absurd, at times serious and somber. Apart from fighting for justice, rights, clean water, medical treatment, what remain ahead is the daily joys of life. All effort have been taken to defamiliarize Bhopal into fictional Kharagpur or the terror city. Bhopal, the city, capital of Madhya Pradesh in 1984, was economically one of the states with low economy. It has to be understood that the Bhopal gas leak was not a one-night disaster. According to the Bhopal Reader by Hana and Sarangi, published in 1969, Union Carbide India Limited was built in Bhopal by Union Carbide Corporation USA, which had 50.9% share and the remaining with Madhya Pradesh state government. The factory was designed to produce a pesticide brand called Savin, which was manufactured using methyl isocyanate and alpha-naphthalene. In the initial days, MIC was imported from USA. which increased the cost of production. By 1979, UCIL, with its arm twisting, was able to get clearance from the regulatory bodies, which otherwise prohibited setting up polluting activity within a range of 2 kilometers from the densely populated area. In 1981, a worker was killed in the factory by leaked phosgene gas. The protests by workers were not lent ear by the management. Again in January 1982, 25 people were hospitalized, being seriously affected by leaked phosgene in the factory. Phosgene was the same gas that Hitler used in the gas chamber to exterminate the Jews during the World War II. Rajkumar Keswani, a journalist of Bhopal, wrote an extensively in his series of articles about the impending threat nestled in UCIL. In April 1982, a UCIL document addressed to UCC, that is Union Carbide Company, head office in USA, and they noted that the continued leakage was causing great concern. Same year, in May, UCC's audit team flew from US to UCIL in India for inspection and noted leaking valves and total of 61 hazards, 30 of which were major and 11 of which were in the phosgene units. Rather, it tried to cover up the series of accidents from coming into light by disconnecting the siren from the warning alert system so that it does not cause undue panic amidst the neighboring occupants. Regular accidents continued because of negligence and poorly trained people employed in the factory. The matter went to the court and it issued a legal notice to UCIL with allegation that it posed serious threats to health hazards for the workers and its close occupants. UCIL abnegated all these accusations as baseless. The number of staff was reduced from 6 to 3 at the production unit of MIC. Final catastrophe was on December 3, 1984, when disaster fell on Black Night of December. Thousands of people and animals died instantly, inhaling the mist of MIC. All these are indicators of gross violations of safety norms in the process of production cost curtailment of a factory that was running in loss. The capitalist mode of profit-making machinery paid the least attention to the welfare and safety of the people, which ultimately led to the disaster. Sinha's novel is an out-and-out a social archive, filled with reconstruction of the reality, rather the tragic reality of the people of Bhopal and the sufferings of the disaster of 1986. He chooses a form and art of characterization that is apparently comic and seems to make fun of serious comments construction. A sort of picaresque novel in his own socio-cultural context is what he aims to write and has successfully written. The outward tone within a conversational style where references to reality are made through mixing the high and the low, the profound and the vulgar, the sane and the insane, is indicative of a serious textual politics of not commodifying the object of his study. The narrative makes a silent comment on the global capitalistic market, where tragedies are raw materials to be converted into finished consumable products or commodity in the garb of new journalism, reports and feature writing and similar literature. Sinha is cautious, rather overcautious, and therefore does not oblige prospective producers and consumers by coming out with sheer news, reporting on the news, critic of a tragic news, and information that is direct and readily comprehensible. Sinha is very clear while setting his fictional agenda and does not care if he might be charged with being practitioner of overuse of postmodern parody and metafictional historiography, and above all, a sort of intertextuality within which the primary text, that is Bhopal disaster, having being already reported in all possible social realist ways, finds its completion and signification in terms of reproduction in the intertext with that Indrasena writes, with the presumptions that intertext is about how the market consumes without caring, reads without recognizing, and forgets without reacting in any possible positive ways. He makes fun of this habit of the producers and consumers of reality by not serving any slice from the socialist menu on a platter to the reader. Rather, in Rushdian way, a chutneyfied fun, parody, and pastiche related and concerning with capitalist designs seen through the detached experience of humble characters at the margins of the society. Central among whom the protagonist animal suffering from immense physical and mental injury caused to him by these designs of global production has the guts to remind prospective consumers of his reality about their own emotional and intellectual bankruptcy in thinking that the entire oppressor oppressed can necessarily be appropriated. A person oppressed like animal who is poor and belongs to the margin of the society could construct his own kind of counter narrative of resistance by making fun of himself and others around him. Fuok, the Australian journalist, is the representation of the big media who comes for making story about Kharagpur, where animal becomes the commodity. But then, he may be prospective commodity, but as Indra Sinha comments, animals not up for garb as he has remarkable awakening and understanding that he does not belong, rather does not exist, and is merely an object in their eyes. But then his simple reply seemed to be, gentlemen, the dead and the inanimate objects do not speak. Animal is a symbol of suffering. Therefore, he prefers to call himself animal, simply because he has found out it's better to be animal in its own limitation, in his situation, in which the margins, the oppressed, the poor usually suffer and are best paid in paltry sums in serving as objects. Animal refuses to be objectified. Animal's life in the wake of the tragedy is also symbolic of how he is capable of exposing in his honest and humble ways of a comprador class colluding with the neo or internal colonizer. People like Farooq Chunaram to the amusement of the reader. The one who needs it most is ready to gain some money by participating in the process of the reality of suffering to be sold in the global capital market. In the novel, animal suffers the most. This instance is easy for animal to take as he has already made a choice of remaining an animal and not becoming a human as he sings, I am animal, fierce and free. As he knows humans have consumerist needs and therefore need money. And he, even if he becomes one, would be an incomplete human in terms of having a disabled body and poor status. In his rejection of this prospect, he discovers in his own peculiar way the art of finding fun, being happy, and a freedom to choose his thoughts and actions in some, an identity that he thinks empowers him in his non human existence as against the disempowering human existence as the poor, disabled sufferers in the hands of the powers that construct, run, and govern the globe within its market. Sinha's metafictional historiography is all about reconstructing an imaginary reality that must reconfirm, highlight, and reconstruct the horrors and details of the Bhopal gas tragedy, not by describing and directly referring to it as he knows enough of it has already been done, but by complementing it in his recording of a careless protagonist of the intertext to the tragedy as taken up an attitude peculiar to his own oppressor. Animal suffers, but do not sell his suffering and have the guts to laugh it loud. The angst of the author in terms of understanding full well that The oppressor, transnational corporate house, has swiftly and readily laid down upon the sorry plight of the sufferers in one of the severest industrial tragedy inflicted upon the poor and the powerless people. There is no sincere hint on part of the perpetrator of the crime down the responsibility of causing thousands of deaths and bringing misery to life and ecosystem. In addition to this, they shamelessly reject the idea of clearing the poisonous wastes still lying untreated, which they have left 28 years ago. There has been almost complete amnesia within the establishment and government of the concerned nation, India and USA, about the tragedy itself. There has been no proper effort of using already existing procedures of law in both the nations towards pushing the criminals and making them own the act of crime and pay the due penalties. Thus, true sympathizer like Indra Sinha, with no other choice but to consider them as inhuman, the ones who even an animal considers inferior and incomplete as compared to his own humble but empowering animal self. Animal refuses to be constructed and reconstructed as human being, as he knows how to enjoy the immense freedom within his non-human sort of uncontrolled existence. Sinha, by using the fictional character of Animal, refuses to be controlled as a novelist, as he knows no direct plea and representation of reality causes any difference in the context that demands a dose of fun, pun, and irony in order to make the capitalist other realize how she or he is being seen in her or his true inhuman and deteriorated self, and if there is any courage, an element of being human still left in the oppressor, then their counter challenge to Sinha would only solve the purpose as a novelist and activist. The real danger, as Sinha points out, is not that the multinational Union Carbide has carved out an image of an enemy of those who suffered its crime. It is more than that, as in the eyes of the sufferers, the whole of the West has come out of an enemy community, and there is no way they can trust and unfold themselves to the West. For example, Eli drops in Khappur with her sincere motive of rendering some help to the sufferers and decides to stay there, opening a free medical clinic. But the people of Khappur, including the protagonist animal, takes for someone for someone belonging to the enemy community, possibly an agent, and do not at all believe and cooperate with her for a substantial period. Sina does not mince words in effecting collusion between the internal colonizers class, including the political class and judiciary bureaucracy, and the neo-colonial colonizing global powers from beyond the borders of the nation. The complicity of the Indian establishment and calculated silence of its political leadership is what is referred in the bold details, and the message is loud and clear. The poor can have no friends, neither at home nor in the outer world, within which their existence is measured in terms of commodifying their misery and not by eliminating it forever. It can, it can be understood by keeping in mind one of the central theme of the novel, that a good number of world is poor ensures that few powerful can be rich and careless. This is how novelist and his characters feel about the reaction and the non-reaction of those who are responsible for causing the tragedy. They are not people devoid of all hope, for as we see in the novel that the show of their life still goes on, life otherwise being lived at a slower pace as it is visibly affected by the tragedy, still manages to have a small share of hope, happiness, and fun. Even love, as you notice in the latter half of the narrative, Zafar with Nisha, and Animal with Anjali, Eli with Nisha's father falling in love. At the end, he once again asserts his animal identity. I quote, right now, I can run and hop can carry kids on my back. I can carry hard trees. I have gone up mountains, roamed in jungles. Is life so bad? If I am upright human, I would be one of millions, not even a healthy one at that. Stay 4 foot, I am one and only animal. What reply would you give, Ellie? I am animal, fierce and free. In all the world is none like me. Eyes, I am done. Khuda Hafiz. Go well. Remember me. All things pass, but the poor remain. We are the people of the apocalypse. Tomorrow there will be more of us. Unquote. These people see a ray at the end of the darkness tail and know full well that the time is going to be the best healer. At the same time, as the concluding message of the protagonist animal suggests, they have learned a lesson, and the lesson is that the discourses of development are violent and their approach towards the poor. That everything else will pass, but the poor will remain. Tomorrow there will be more of us, and it is in this spirit that the novel swiftly makes its way towards adding to the social archive concerning one of the greatest human industrial apocalypse during the contemporary type of Indian soil. The key word here seems to be that the trivializing, which is Sinha's best mode of highlighting, Sinha's mode of writing, derived from the postmodern greed of narrativity, which underscores the need of imaginative shock treatment to the readers in creating postmodern pastiche, parody, metafictional historiography, and intertextuality, within which intertext does not directly refer to the text but creates a necessity in the reader to understand the meaning of the text. That is, in this context, the industrial disaster of Bhopal caused by the Union Carbide India Limited.